Hello, this is Sheila back again with another tutorial. This is similar to the last tutorial I did. It's the same pattern and it's my open moss stitch pattern. You can see. And this is knit with, this is Wendy Supreme. This is just some yarn I had left over from the last order that I knit. The large jacket it wasn't a child's one. And you can get this Wendy Supreme from most sites at £1.79 a ball. And I was robbed when I got this. I got it from eBay and I paid £2.50 a ball. And then I found out afterwards, after I had ordered it and it had arrived, and I checked on other sites and found I could get it for £1.79, which was really annoying. But anyway, it's a lovely, lovely wool to knit with. I really like knitting with this, and I think this will replace a lot of the wool that I do get. But anyway, this is what I'm doing here, and I've started this, and I've got 60 stitches, and I've knit 10 rows in 1x1 twisted rib, and the pattern is knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 all the way across. That's for one row, and then the row on the wrong side is purl, and then when you come to do the next row, where that row had started with purl 2, knit 2, would start with knit 2, purl 2. So there's actually 4 rows to the pattern. In this one I'm going to start off with knit 2, and then purl 2. And as you can see, the number of rows between the purl stitches there and the purl stitches there, and the same here. And that's how it's done all the way across the row. Just purl 2, knit 2, or knit 2, purl 2, depends which row you're on to. And that's just a little bit for now. When I get up to the armholes, I will come back with another bit of the tutorial. And just to show, you can't really measure something till it comes off the needles, but this is, it measures 11.5 inches across. So I know it's going to be probably at least 21 inches, because you do need a little bit extra when you sew it up. You lose a little bit on the sides with the sewing up, and even if you do a 20 inch, you want it to measure 21 inch. You always have a little bit extra. You don't actually do it what the actual body measures. So I will come back when I get a little bit more of this, when I get up to the armholes. I'll be doing about 8.5 inches to the armholes, 8.5 or 9 inches. I'll let you know when I come back with the rest of the tutorial. Well, hello everyone, this is the back part of the cardigan finished, and I'm going to measure. It measures 11.5 inches, so this is going to be a 22 inch, and that extra half inch, that's where you lose the little bits on the sides here where you do the sewing up. And as I told you at the start, I started off with 60 stitches, did 10 rows of twisted rib, and for those that don't know how to do twisted rib, you just knit into the back of the knit stitch, every stitch on every row. Just the knit stitch, not the purl stitch. And then this pattern is just, you knit 2 rows to start, a knit row and a purl row, and then you do knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 all the way across the row, and then you do 1 purl row, And then the next row, instead of starting with knit, you start with purl, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and that's, you alternate those 2 rows, so there's 4 rows to the pattern. And when I come to the armholes, I knit to 8.5 inches, which I will measure. It'll probably measure a little bit more because the side you get, it actually says 9 inches there, but it was only 8.5 inches. It's the side spreads out a little bit. So when I come to do the armholes, I cast off 3 stitches at each end. So that was 2 rows, and then I knit 2 rows of pattern, and then I started a decreasing, which was knit 1 stitch, slip 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch, and then pass that slip stitch over and knit to the end, and knit 2 together and knit 1, and then you do one row of purl, and then you do that again, knit 1, slip 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch, and pass the slip stitch over, knit to the end, and knit 2 together. And that's how you do the shaping. And I just carried on every other row until I had 20 stitches left, and then put those stitches onto a holder. And that's how you do the back. And for anyone that wants, that's what I've done. I've told you there it's a 22-inch open moss stitch, because that's what I call this pattern. It's 325mm and 4mm needles, and I've given you instructions for the back up to the armholes, and then up to the last 20 stitches on a holder. And now I have started on the left front. My needles just rolled off the table. And for the left front, it's using 325mm needles, cast on 28 stitches, knit 1 by 1 twisted rib for 10 rows, change to 4mm needles, knit 1 row and purl 1 row, and then knit in pattern until the work measures 8.5 inches. And you just need to look up here for the pattern, which was knit 2, purl 2, repeat to the end, row 4 purl, and then row 5 purl 2, knit 2, repeat to the end, and so on. Just need to follow the pattern from there, and I will give you more instructions when I get further up the left front. So that's a little bit for now. Well, I'm up to the armholes on the left side. I've knit 8.5 inches. There's 28 stitches cast on, 10 stitches in 1 by 1 rib, and then 8.5 stitches up to 8.5 inches up to the armhole. So I'm going to cast off 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to knit across to the end of the row. Now I will pause it till I get to the end of the row. And I've knitted that to the end of that row and purled across the other row. And I'm going to knit another 2 rows, pattern row and a purl row, and then I will start the shaping. So that's a knit 1 and purl 2. I'll do knit 2 because that's the shaping. And I will pause that until I come to the row to do the shaping. So that's 4 rows all together I have done, including the cast off the stitches, where I cast the stitches off for the armhole. And I'm going to do the shaping. I'm going to knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, and then pass that slip stitch over the knit stitch, and then just continue and pattern across the row. It's purl 2, knit 2, that's a decreasing row. The next row will be a purl row. Now I pause it until I get through that row. And now we're going to decrease again. Knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, and pass the slip stitch over, and then pattern across the row, and do that on every alternate row until there are 15 stitches left, and then I will come back and show the neck shaping. Now we have 15 stitches left. Now I'm going to cast off 4 stitches for the neck edge. It's 1, 2, 3, it's 4, and purl to the end of that row. Now we're going to decrease at the neck edge and the armhole edge. We're going to decrease at the neck edge 4 times and keep on at the armhole edge until we have 2 stitches remaining after that. And that's 2. And then knit 2 together at the and at the neck edge, and I'm going to do that another 2 times at the neck edge while I'm still decreasing at the armhole edge. This is the next part of the tutorial. I've cast on 32 stitches and knit 10 rows, knit 1, purl 1, twisted rib, and then I've started doing the pattern. And when I started the pattern, I knit 2 rows first, and then I started with purl 1, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and so on across the row. And now I've increased the stitches on the 4th row, and I'm doing them on every 8th row. And on the 4th row is on the wrong side. To increase the stitches on the wrong side with this pattern makes the stitches so they're not seen so much. So I'm going to show you how I do the increase on the wrong side, because it's all purl across this row and it hides the stitches on the other side. You don't see them so much. So I'm purling 1 stitch, purling the next stitch, and then knitting into the back of that stitch, and then going to purl across to the end. And I'll pause that till I get to the end. And I'm up to the end of this row, and I'm going to do the same. I've knitted the last 3 stitches. I'm going to purl into that stitch and then knit into the back of the same stitch, and then purl those last 2 stitches off the needle. And that's how the decreasing goes on here. And if you'll see, you look for where to start, what stitch you start with. There was 2 purl stitches here, so those 2 stitches there are going to be purl. So those 2 will be knit, and that one will be purl. So I'll show this. That's how to keep the pattern correct. So I'm going to purl 1 stitch, knit 2, then purl 2 stitches, and then the next 2 stitches are knit. And that's how you keep the pattern correct while increasing stitches. And it's very hard to see where the stitches have been increased. And you're going to do that every 8th row. And I'll show you, I've already knit 1 piece. This is the first sleeve, and I'll blow that up, and you look closely, you can't really see where the stitches have been increased. That's why it's easier to do these patterns like this, to do the increasing on the wrong side. And then you will be knitting every 8th row until you have 44 stitches, and then I will come back and tell you how to do the decreasing. Now I'm up to the armhole shaping, and I've cast off 3 stitches at each end, and then I knit 2 more rows, and on the 4th row I decreased on each end, and then I knit another 4 rows, and on the 8th row I decreased again. And now I'm going to decrease on the next row and every alternate row. This is on the 8th row. I'm doing the the 4th and the 8th. This is the 10th row. So from the 10th row, it's every other row that I'm decreasing. I'm knitting 1 stitch, slipping 1 stitch, knitting the next stitch, passing that slip stitch over. Then I have to work out what the stitch is. Well, that's 2 purl stitches there and 1 knit stitch, so that's 1 knit stitch next, 2 purl stitches, then I'm knit 2 and purl 2 across the row till I get to the other end, and now I'll meet you at the other end. And I'm on to the last 4 stitches, so I'm going to knit 1, knit 2 together, and knit the last stitch. And that is how I'm going to decrease every other row until I reach the top, which will be this one. When I get that far, to 8 stitches, and I'll put the stitches onto a safety pin and hold them until I do the neck on the cardigan. And that's it until I do the neckband and the front button bands. Well, this is my child's cardigan almost finished. All I need to do now is put the button band and the buttonhole bands on and sew it all up and then put buttons on. I do things backward form, as a lot of people would have this all sewn up first, but I do things my way. But anyway, when I had come to do the neck, I picked up 13 stitches on this front, 8 stitches across the sleeve, 22 stitches across the back, 8 stitches across that sleeve, and another 13 down here, and then I knitted 4 rows and then cast off the stitches across the top. Now when I come to do the bands, I'm doing them, putting them on sideways, and this is to show how I work it out. I have my tape measure. And my tape measure for the band, you can see, is 12 inches. So the tension for this garment is 5.5 stitches to the inch. So you have to work out 12 times 5.5, which is 66. And I put markers in every 2 inches here on both sides. So that means you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. And you divide that 66 by 6, which is 11. So you'll pick up 11 stitches in between each set of markers here. And that'll be your 66 stitches for the band. And I always do the button band first, and this is for a little boy, so the button band will be this side. I had to think I'm used to doing them for myself. I'll be that side, and then the button band, I'll do that afterwards, and then I'll work out the for the buttonholes. But I will come to that after I pick up that band. When I come to do this one, I'll show how to do the buttonholes. As you can see, I've done one side for the buttons, and now I'm doing the side, and I've marked out exactly where I'm going to put the buttonholes. So I have, in between each marker, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've put the marker on the 6th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the 6th knit stitch. And that's the same for all of them. That was where I put the first buttonhole there. And when I come to the buttonhole, I'm knitting that stitch and that stitch together, but I will show you as I'm doing it. Wait till my phone clears a bit. That's it. That's knit one. Now I'm going to do the buttonhole layer where that knit stitch is and that purl stitch. That's where I've got the marker on the knit stitch. So I'm bringing the wool forward and I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together. You keep this when you have the wool forward, keep it pretty slack. Keep your finger on there to stop it going tight. Knit those 2 together. There you see you have a slack. The stitch where I've made the extra stitch is slack where the hole is. And then on to the next one. And now I'm going to make another buttonhole. You can see that's where the knit stitch and that purl stitch is. So bringing the yarn forward, knitting 2 stitches together, and keep your finger on this where the wool goes forward so it doesn't go tight. There you have a slack stitch where the hole is. And carry on to the next buttonholes. And that's how you do the buttonholes. It's very simple. As you can see, it's a good size buttonhole. I'm putting, I think it's 15mm buttons on here, so I will get one out and show what I'm putting. This is the size of the button I'm putting on, so I don't know whether it'll go through that buttonhole because it's not finished yet, but yes, it goes through all right. They are like a 2-tone grey and white. Forget what you call these buttons. I'll have to have a look up. These are the last I have of these. I'll have to look for some more. But that's the size buttonhole. I think they're 15mm. So now I just have to finish off doing that band and then stitch all the cardigan up, and I will come back with the finished product. Right, I'm now sewing the seams on this cardigan, and when I do the raglan, I do a flat stitch. That is, you hold the 2 pieces of the yarn together like that. And just put the needle from one side to the other. Do not pull the stitches too tight, or else you'll gather the seam. I have a pin there to do. I've left my pin cushion down there. So just lightly pull the thread through, or the yarn through. A lot of well knitted garments are let down with the sewing afterwards because of the seams. So you can see I've started sewing that seam and how it's flat on the other side. I'll show you the other seams I've done. Right, I've stitched these 2 seams here. I have a lot of ends to get rid of here. And when the seam is done, like this one, you should be able to stretch the seam like that, so it stretches with the knitting. That's what lets a lot of knitters down when they come to sew. They don't know how to sew, and these seams here are gathered in, so you can't stretch them like that. And that's how the seam should be on a raglan. And it's very easy, just sewing the two ends from each side together, but not pulling the stitch too tight. You can see there the stitch is not tight. It still stretches with the it gives with the rest of the cardigan. And that's how to do a flat seam. When I get to the sides, I will show you how to do the side seams. And now I'm on to the I'm sewing the sleeve up at the moment, and that'll be the sides after that. When I do the cuff part, the ribbed part, that is a flat stitch, which is the same as how I did the raglan seams. You just go from one side to the other, and that's knotted thread there, and just pull it through until you get to where the rib finishes. And where the pattern starts on the cardigan. It's around about here. And then you do a back stitch on I'll put 1 or 2 pins in. And then you just back stitch on the sleeve up to as far as it takes up to the armhole. And I use all the ends that I've left on the start of the knitting. And so as far as those ends take me, and then I might have to add some more. That's a simple back stitch. You can see. And that's how I sew up the side and the sleeve seams. See, very simple, there's nothing to it. There you can see the stitches where the back stitch has gone on the other side, and just to show the the raglans. That's the raglans all stitched up, and you can see there's plenty give in the raglans. You can't see that one before that's pinned up. The next bit will be the buttons after I've got 2 of the buttons, and I'll come back with that. That's the cardigan finished, apart from 1 button, which I'm going to show how I sew on. I placed all the buttons next to the buttonholes, and then worked out where they had to go and stitch them on, and this is the last one, and I'll loosen these 2 next to it. But I just placed the needle into that hole so I know exactly where the button was going. With a couple of stitches before you add the button. Now I usually go 3 times into the button. And I always stitch up with the yarn that's left over from the garment. I don't sew buttons on with thread. And a couple of stitches in the back. Just put the needle through, the loop over the needle, and then I do that 3 times behind the button. And that secures it. And then cut it off. So that's the cardigan finished, and this cardigan measures just a little bit more than 11 inches, which makes it a 22. The full body, the back length is 13 inches. Side measurement is 9 inches. And the sleeve measurement is almost 10 inches, and I'm holding the measure a little bit close. So I'd say about, I aimed at 9.5 inches, but it's almost 10 inches. So that's a good size for a 22, probably fit a 1 to 2 year old. So now I just have to sort that and get it onto my Etsy shop. So that's the whole cardigan, the tutorial for the whole cardigan. And I have the instructions here for anyone that may want to see. I'll hold it there long enough for anyone that wants to take a picture, screenshot, or it's that page. And the last page. So that's my tutorial for this cardigan. So the thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll show you another one sometime. So bye for now.